Welcome to Exhaling South African World Lead History Podcast. I'm your host, Homotso Dibezo, and I'm here with Ntate Vilagazi. And we actually are going to be presenting to you guys like episode 1. So, Ntate Vilagazi, how are you doing?
Well, I guess I'm okay,
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like I'm okay, especially that you are giving me the opportunity to exhale this history.
Yes.
That is so important for posterity to know and to live with, especially to also boost their self-esteem.
Yes.
Because once people know their own history, they can have a good self-esteem.
100%.
And so you can imagine the South African history, especially Black liberation history,
Yes.
has been told from the point of view of the Sowetos and so on. Whereas the truth of the fact of the matter
Yes.
is that whole story, that whole history rolled out of Everton, Everton Township.
Everton Township. That's
Yeah.
interesting because you've been actually mentioning Everton like ever since we started talking about this history, and I'm interested in finding out what actually happened like in Everton that actually ignited this revolution that we saw happening in South Africa. Do you mind sharing with us a bit like what happened during that time?
I don't mind. I'm going to share with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm here to share that with you. The thing is, the South African history and liberation history
Yes.
remade itself, rebirthed itself in the 1950s through some incidences like the winds of change.
Yeah.
Then, not the winds of change of Macmillan of the 1960s, but Macmillan, Prime Minister of England, might have been influenced by the winds of change that had begun to blow in the 50s in this country, starting from Everton specifically. That is why I have a book that will be out very soon. That will be entitled "The Sun Will Never Set on Everton Ever."
Okay.
The sun will never set on Everton ever, and I mean it, as I will be sharing this history with yourself.
Yes.
And unfolding a number of things that people might not be aware of, or have deliberately neglected, because Everton has been a freehold black estates owned by black people, and nobody wanted those kind of people to have any history to reckon with.
Yes.
It's like they were backward. It is like a bundu within the urban area. Even Alexandra Township is treated better than Everton because it is sitting cheek by jowl with Johannesburg. You understand what I mean?
So
yes.
So I just want to understand, like, why isn't there information like on Everton? Like, why isn't it recognized? Like, welcome to that shifted or that contributed or that had a huge impact. Like, I'm your host, Homotso, the history that unfolded during the 1950s. And we actually are going to be presenting to you guys like episode 1
to write our history.
So, the Vilagazi, how are you doing?
We wanted white people to write our history.
Yeah.
And then we wanted black people who are anti-other black groups like okay, especially.
But there isn't really.
So, which is the normative opportunity to narrative this history, which is also that is so political for posterity. Yes. To know.
Because I'm just looking up, and when I did my research on Everton, like I found like general things about the area, but not the history that took place, or not even people of recognition or people who had an impact in what happened in the 1950s that led to the abolishment of the apartheid system. There aren't any recognizable people. Or maybe do you know any recognizable people that
in my blood that whole story, that whole they are infused all out of Everton, and I'm going to share
that with I'm Everton Township. That's interesting because you've been actually mentioning Everton like ever since.
I'm a composite.
And I'm interested in finding out what actually happened
to start shooting off. Let me tell you,
this revolution that we saw happening.
At the dawn.
Do you mind sharing with us a bit like what happened during the time?
I don't mind. I'm going to share who have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm here to share that with you. Mine working is Israel. And his real name was Liberation History. Came to settle in Everton and made itself a rebirth itself in the 90s temple to be put up there. Some incidents in the state for the church, the winds of change belong to the enemy then, not the winds of change until his death. But he had to bring a temple, Macmillan, in Everton of England. Right after he left by the Orlando East, that had begun to church where from in the 50s operating in this country. He came starting from Everton, specific and was established in Everton. And that is why Prophet have a camel that will be out very soon. And Prophet McKenna was adherent, the son will never, the Marcus Garvey movement. The Marcus Garvey movement, the son will never said the 1920s to 25. And I mean it, he was a student of that movement. And he came and established sharing this history in Everton in the 50s and organized underground unfolding a number of things that people to empower the people or healed them physically. He fed them, Everton, and he also nourished them spiritually. And he explained some of his auxiliaries, and nobody wanted the maroon kind of people to have any history and had a day as like the way called the maroon day is like and he actually said the time when Jesus comes, you know, that day even Alexander Township is treated better than Everton. He said when Jesus comes it will be maroon to Johannesburg. You understand?
So
very interesting because he was
so I just want to understand like why isn't
playing with the mind
like
of the apartheid system,
like on Everton, like why isn't it recognized like other areas that shifted or that contributed or that had a huge impact, like change or in the history that unfolded during the 1950s and 1960s?
Part of Jacob Zuma. We have depended too much on just playing with words to write. So he organized them. Firstly, we wanted white people, the women, and then we wanted black people who were anti-other black people, you know, frocks.
But there isn't really,
which is the normative and narrative their own, which is auxiliary social workers. And on the
because I'm just looking up, and you know, when I did my research on Everton, like I found like general things about the area, but not the history
in Jamaica
or not even people of recognition or people who had an impact in what happened during 1950s that led to the abolishment of the slavery system. There aren't any recognizable people, or maybe do you know any recognizable people that
in my last film, they went there, they were called the outcasts, but they built their inferior city called, and the name is going to share that in the mountains. And they staged wherever the part was against the white people. And a composite capital that is established. When Indians captured, you know, that Caribbean to start shooting off, let me tell you. The camera was repeating that at the dawn of the 50s, and not a prophet called Prophet McKenna, this story, who had been, I know it personally, because I knew that there was a mine worker in the room day to be expected. His real name, McKenna's theological point of view.
So that's where it all actually started, or that's where the link comes in between that time of history and what happened, like during apartheid.
To be there. Which it was a repeat of the church, not the church. He belonged to the evening church. It was being repeated until his death. Tell you how, but he had to bring a temple. He was Everton. After he left, Wise McKenna Orlando East.
Okay.
Change away from empowering people.
Okay.
Galvanizing, mobilizing the dawn of the 50s with the theology underground in Everton of liberation.
So he was giving them information about how to think,
and Prophet
like how to think was like a person who's free rather than someone who is enslaved.
I'm sorry to call you sir. Yes, you know, yeah. He was teaching them self-help skills. How to do trade,
yes.
Just like Marcus Garvey galvanized and mobilized Black America,
yes,
in the 1920s
to liberate their minds from structural thinking that was brought on by the system.
That's right, yes. And as a result, in 1955, the Everton people rose against a bus company which was running from Johannesburg to Everton, and also from Everton to the mines in the west area, in the western area town mines and the Randfontein mines and so on. And they boycotted the bus for raising their fares that they could not afford anymore.
So what, they were boycotting this bus because of they didn't want to pay, and was that because of
for a number of reasons? They didn't want to pay more.
Okay.
And they felt the buses must move inside the township,
or not around
just
it.
Around the township.
Okay.
Whereby people had to walk long distances to catch the bus. But it is like the bus was treating them like people with leprosy. I mean, especially that their inner part of the township, that we can't go in there. And you know, those times buses were driven by white people, too white to go in there.
So now they treated these people like that just because the place didn't lack, or like was it?
They didn't lack anything. It was just they did that in many areas, like Alexandra, and so on.
So this bus company now had to change their route now because the people didn't want.
Let's not get into whether they changed their routes or not. Let's get to the point that they were forced to do a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Yes, but after a lot of bloodshed in Everton.
Oh, so
they were able, through the Boers, the apartheid government, to organize miners from Lesotho to come and fight with the black people.
Yes.
Which means black on black violence was already engineered, machinated by this apartheid government. It was not the first time when it happened during our transition. It has been happening. They've been using black on black violence. But let me hasten to say, the bus boycott started in 1955. It immediately spread to Kliptown, to Western area, and to Alexandra in South Africa. It started on the 24th of July in 1955.
Oh, okay.
And then it went on to Cape Town.
So now this company was probably a huge South African company, right?
No, it was not.
It was a government.
The same bus company. But bus boycotts started
happening. Okay.
Like in Cape Town, the Colored People's Organization
now they also
organized their own bus boycotts.
Okay.
In 1950. From 1956 to 1957.
So now there was a movement now where people were boycotting because of these bus services were treating them different from other areas or from other people like who are getting the same.
Yes, and it was a spirit of self-liberation.
Okay.
To exhale their pain, to say we are also people
as well,
and we can show you that we have power. We can withdraw our labor by not boarding buses to work. You understand what I mean? And this happened, and it spread to Cape Town. Yeah. And then it went to Port Elizabeth. In 1957, and in Port Elizabeth it lasted through 1957, 1960, and 1961.
So now people were actually fighting back by not using those bus services.
Yeah, using the bus boycott thing
yes,
as the starting point for the revolution.
So people wanted to be free ultimately. It was not just about them not being able to get on the bus, but them having freedom to do whatever.
No, let's not talk about freedom. People wanted liberation. I'm more comfortable with liberation.
Okay.
They wanted their own liberation. Freedom can mean I'm no more carrying a pass.
Yeah.
I can marry a white woman. That is called freedom.
Yeah.
They were not looking for that. They wanted self-liberation. They were actuating their own self-liberation. And incidentally, in December of 1955 already, this bus boycott had spread to Montgomery, Alabama in the U.S.
Yes, because of...
Yeah, they had spread to Montgomery, Alabama in the U.S.
Yeah.
And ignited at first by Rosa Parks, who refused to give a white man her seat in a bus, and sparking those boycotts that spread across America.
Oh yeah.
And incidentally, her family came from the Marcus Garvey background, just as McCamel came from the Marcus Garvey background. So when it happened in that very year, it was very clear that South Africa through Everton can influence world history, world black liberation history.
Yes.
And it did, not just it can.
Wow.
It actually did influence it. And people don't want to tell this history because they don't want to empower black people.
Why? Because of... And like, so what do they think will happen? Like, when we have this information, we will like start treating them differently, or will it be about changing how we see ourselves?
If you know how politics work around history, there's what they call the normative narrative.
Yes.
And it is all about
so that narrative can be changed, though, and they probably wouldn't want to change that narrative because of what it supports, an idea that they have.
It supports suppression. Look, they wanted people have to be suppressed. You don't have to tell your history, even theologically, spiritually, and otherwise. You don't have to be a real person. You don't have to exist. You understand what I mean? You have to exist, under the shadow of the white person and the black person who has suddenly become white, who also wants to control history. And that is a political powers. Even today, even when you want to publish a book, you struggle because they want you to be a celebrated person first, a celebrity. Whereas in the past, you could write a book and get published tomorrow. But today you have to be a special kind of black. Like they call black people diamonds. They call them, even the clever blacks.
Yeah.
They call them such, monikers and so on. So just like they call Nanny, who drove the revolution in Jamaica, it was a moniker. Nobody knows her name up till now.
Okay.
She came from the Asante nation in Ghana. Most of the warriors were fighting as Maroons.
Oh.
Yes, and she took advantage of being called Nanny to say the white people call her Nanny, the black people call her Nanny, and they establish a Nanny town.
Okay.
For that matter. So it is always suppression of history. The fact that we don't know her real name is also a mode of suppression of history.
So she was obviously taken from Ghana to Jamaica
as a slave.
And was she one of the people who mobilized or who started that revolution of...
Actually, she was at the lead of the Maroons. You understand what I mean? She was a magnificent woman. Like if you know your slavery history, there were people like Sojourner Truth, like Harriet Tubman, who organized the underground train.
Yes, Harriet Tubman.
Yes. To free the slaves.
Yes.
And she did that in Jamaica. They simply went to the mountains.
Wow. No, I think this is very important for a lot of us to understand this information, because of like you said, that history somehow, like, it gives that understanding, really makes you aware of who you are, and like, just, seeing how black people like overcame challenges. It gives you encouragement, it gives you knowledge, it gives you a different perspective in terms of how you can also use that knowledge that you've gained from those people's experiences to grow or to overcome your own challenges that you are faced with today. So I think having access to this information and having it in the mainstream also could really change a lot of people's perspectives about black people and our history, not just in South Africa, but
Yes.
around the world.
But my perspective is that, and my heart for history is where I am. And many people must begin to zero in to where they are. You get my drift?
Yes.
And people have to write local histories so that they can understand and share them from under the tree, like I said last week.
Yeah.
You know that your room here,
yes,
your study room is a modern day under the shade of the tree.
Yes.
And so people must begin to share these histories, like I'm sharing it with you now. That the other mystery is that Rosa Parks was a member of the AME Church, was a stewardess.
Okay.
McCamel was a patron of the WMS of the AME Church in Trinity AME Church, Everton, that is still standing there, and his temple is still standing there. And during the bus boycotts, most people would come and hide in the farms, like where we are. It was the farm of a woman called Mass Maid.
Yes.
It was Mrs. Smith's farm, and people would come with their babies and hide here, so that the women and the children hide, and so that men can do the fighting in the village itself.
Okay.
And some of them went to McCamel for refuge.
Yes.
In McCamel's temple, and he kept them there and fed them.
Oh.
You understand what I mean? So that is the role that was played, and this is never told. And as a result of that, we began to get people like David Sibeko.
Okay.
David Sibeko, Vusemake, Joe Mulifi, A.B. Sandamela, and others who were actually Pan-Africanist Congress members, who had also been influenced by the Gavi movement.
Oh, okay. So now we're going back to Gavi again, because you have mentioned Gavi so in multiple times. So I'm guessing now that he had a huge impact in many people's lives, especially around the world, for black people.
Yes.
Like, was he also from the Maroon background, or like was he? Because I know he was also from Jamaica, but he moved to the United States.
Yes. If you are from Jamaica, you are black.
Yes.
You're automatically from the Maroons. You are a descendant.
Oh, yes.
You understand what I mean? He was showing the black Americans in America that, hey, man, you can do it yourself. You understand?
You can liberate your own mind.
That's right. And everything else, socially, spiritually, you can liberate yourself. Now, these people began to organize in Everton, organize the Pan-Africanist Congress, which ultimately gave us the Sharpeville shootings.
Okay, so the Pan-African were the ones like who ignited the Sharpeville shootings.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
And from Everton, as you know, that Sharpeville lies cheek by jowl with Everton.
Yes.
It is an extension of Everton.
Everton, yeah.
You know, and so these people that I have just mentioned produced a very powerful person called David Sibeko.
David Sibeko, okay.
David Sibeko was the first person, anti-apartheid movement leader, to ever address the Security Council of the United Nations.
Okay.
To a point where people began to call him the Malcolm X
of South Africa.
Which is nonsensical to me. You know, we must not always be likened to other people. Let Malcolm X be Malcolm X.
And let David Sibeko be David Sibeko.
You might say, why am I also called Muhammad Ali? it's not like I'm trying to be a Muhammad Ali of South Africa. It is because my style of boxing, and I was also a fighter in my younger days. So I used to win most of my fights around Everton.
Yeah.
And my eldest brother called me Cassius Clay then. He was still called Cassius.
Yes.
When he moved out of Cassius Clay's name and drifted to Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
So my eldest brother, his name was Bulldog, he called me Muhammad Ali. Until the Muslim group in Everton last year, on the 6th of May, decided to rubber stamp it that you are real Muhammad Ali.
Nice.
In the, you know what I mean? So and during that time, there was this also this advocate Duma, who became a very celebrated ANC advocate in exile. He had incidentally came from Everton and had rubbed shoulders with his PAC people, though he was ANC itself.
Oh.
So the significant role that Dumanoko played in exile and other places, it is also because he had suckled from the breast of Everton.
Okay.
He was a very outstanding leader of the ANC.
Of the ANC.
Yes.
So pretty much like these people like were leading this movement that started this massacre like in Sharpeville. Yeah. So like how did
that led to that led to that?
Yes, it led to actually having a massacre that like people were actually like
mowed down.
Like shot down, and it was a very horrific scene to see a lot of people.
Yes, I was 7 years old. I was there.
You were also there
bullets
as well.
Flew over the roof of my home at Sharpeville. If we had a window facing the police station, we were so close, some bullets would have landed in my house. It is, by grace that we didn't have a window on that side. You know, I was 7 years old. I experienced the bullets shooting and everything, and neighbors who fell. Others died, and others stayed with bullets lodged in their bones for a long time.
So, and all of this was because of people didn't want to use passbooks.
Yes. So the bus boycott gave birth to passbook boycott.
So already by that time, people were already using passbooks, right? So they no longer wanted to have a bus service that did not service them, right?
Yes.
And also them having to carry this passbook.
Yes.
Like around when they were moving around the city and all that. So people just decided like on a particular day that they're gonna gather and march against these things, not just the passbooks but also the bus
other
as well.
Injustices.
Yes.
Like Nyakaletsolo, who led the Sharpeville march.
Yes.
It was the biggest in the country because the spirit of fighting was already in them. They had weaned it from Everton already. So they were able to amass a group of people, even more than the PAC leader who did that in Orlando East, Sobukwe himself. And not that Sobukwe was weaker, but he didn't have a fertile ground like the Val, if we have to say that.
Yes. So meaning in Val there were more leaders.
Yeah, the ground was more fertile for liberation. The people's minds and souls were long prepared for liberation, to fight it and to engender it.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. And all of this is for human rights, because of obviously at the end of the day, like this is obviously like this was something that was happening for a very long time. So it was just a reaction of what had happened like in previous years. And I think
let me correct you. It's not for human rights. Don't be misled by the people who call Sharpeville Day Human Rights Day.
Yeah.
That's just a fashion. It's just a fad that came the other day. Sharpeville Day remains Sharpeville Day.
Yes.
And human rights is another thing.
Okay.
It's another case altogether. I believe in human rights.
Yes.
But black liberation was not human rights. And some people began to distort it and contort it into human rights fights and so on.
Yes.
As though they were together with us as humans. They were not together with us. They treated us like subhumans. When did we suddenly qualify to be humans like that?
No, I think obviously like these types of events were the ones that triggered like us or other people or other races realizing that, okay, this is not something that needs to be done. Okay, so like we're talking about Human Rights Day, or how Dr. Vilakazi does not subscribe to Human Rights Day because of obviously like Human Rights Day. Many people may not know that it only changed in 1994. Before then, it was not even like Human Rights Day. It was Sharpeville Day. So obviously, like I think that's where like you're looking at it from that perspective that okay, this day was pretty much about black liberation and not so much about Human Rights Day, although we are all humans, but obviously it was mainly focusing on black history. So I want to understand that like from that perspective, why do you think people need to look at it from a black liberation mindset compared to just looking at it from a human rights perspective? Because of
your question is to say, why do I want people to? Normally I don't indoctrinate people.
Okay.
I'm just a teacher.
Yeah.
And I leave for people to decide.
Yes.
Now I'm teaching from perspective of the fact that I come from Sharpeville.
Yes.
I grew up at Sharpeville, although I'm born in Everton. My vehicle code is in Everton at number 1.
Yes.
And my younger brother, Bavumile Vilakazi, became mayor of Ekurhuleni, first executive mayor and ambassador to Uganda.
Wow.
Was born in 1955, that very 1955 in Everton.
Wow.
He was being shielded as a baby during those times. Was boycott.
Yes.
Either at McCamel's temple or in the farms here.
Yes.
So this is very significant to me. If you talk of Everton, you talk Sharpeville, and for me, you cannot erase Sharpeville and call it Human Rights Township.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? It's a Sharpeville Day, and it has always been Sharpeville Day, and so. I need posterity to know that it is Sharpeville Day. And even if I have to tell them to reject this concept of human rights, because it is like you're getting promoted to be human. When as an indigenous person you are even more human than people can ever fathom, can ever
think about,
understand.
Yeah.
Understand your humanity, your Ubuntu surpasses even the human ethic. You understand what I mean? So you cannot be taught human rights now at the expense of Sharpeville Day.
Yes.
Teach human rights in your own way. Don't usurp Sharpeville from us. Don't hijack it.
Like backpacking it. Like
you understand what piggybacking on
it.
You understand what I mean? And make it as though it is a new thing. South Africa has come to the point of human rights. South Africa has, we all know, South Africa has not yet come to the point of complete human rights.
Yes.
You understand what I mean? So, black mind liberation is still very vital.
It is
very significant.
No,
like my other name is Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
So I'm Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
I sting like a bee. I fly like a butterfly.
Yes.
You understand what I mean? I arrest the stone and send thunder to jail. You understand what I mean? That's how I approach things.
Yeah.
I come with power.
Yeah.
And I don't just come like, hey, what shall we do?
Yeah.
And then now these Afrikaners in negotiations want us to change this day and call it Human Rights Day. You understand? People call those people who acceded to their puppets.
Okay.
I don't call them puppets. I know what they were going through during those times.
Okay.
Yes. But it does not mean they cannot be corrected today. They have to be corrected. And in very, very fast for that matter. In essence, everything that they came back with to appease the apartheid regime, former regime, has to be revisited so that even Nkosi Sigelele can be sung the way it was sung. But I'm not so big into that. Because I also don't have quarrel with Afrikaans. I have no quarrel with English that we are speaking now. But I'm also always conscious of the fact that I'm speaking township English.
Yes.
I mean, you cannot judge my pronunciations. You cannot judge my diction. You understand what I mean? Because it's township. You get my drift.
100%.
So in that very order, Sharpeville is Sharpeville.
Sharpeville is Sharpeville. So, and people need to remember it as being Sharpeville.
Yes, it's Sharpeville shooting, and it is Sharpeville, the cousin of Everton. Or even the child of Everton.
Yes.
Because it came out of it's actually the child of Everton. And that's where all history began. And I'm praisingly saying history began, Black liberation history was reignited in Everton.
Which was it like a farm or was it like
Everton?
Yes.
Yes, it was a big farm owned by people like one of them was called Adam, and her daughter was Eva, which named this town, this place, and they were from the First World War. And they had these farms, and suddenly they had this dream of empowering Black people to have their own. They actually sold these stands to Black people. But making more money out of it than anybody else. So everything has always been capitalist. Glory, and
So but when I look at Everton today, to me, it's still very underdeveloped in a sense that even with the history, it's like it's hidden in a sense that it's not being brought into our attention, like as people who live in this place or this town, because of you go around here, like you don't really see much or you don't really hear much up until you start having conversations about this.
I was out of Everton for 39 years. When I got here, I find phrases strengthened, phrases like we are together. You understand what I mean? And it also comes out as a cover-up of slave mentality. We are together doing what? These people are not together doing anything.
You
understand what I mean?
So many people
is an excuse. We are together. It's an excuse. You cannot. You must rebuild Everton. Some friend of mine, relative of mine, said, if I see somebody wearing a T-shirt emblazoned, I love Everton. I don't care for that. What is it to love about Everton? But you have to love Everton history first to love it. You don't jump into loving it
without understanding
where it comes
from.
That understanding that it has to be rejuvenated. Life has to be brought back to
it. Can inspire people.
Yes. That's why my upcoming book is The Sun Shall Never Set on Everton. And it brings out the quality people that came out of Everton.
And that's
by name. You understand what I mean? And on those who joined Everton from the diaspora through establishing the Wilberforce, not actually establishing, because the Wilberforce Institute was established by a man called J.Z. Tanzi, the Reverend J.Z. Tanzi. And the first of its kind in the whole of South Africa to empower Black people. And then they were able to get Americans because their sons had studied in America. They were getting these people in the U.S. to come and help take Wilberforce off the ground educationally. And that in many ways also shook the white people of this country. because around just before then, a man called Bishop Turner had come to meet Paul Kruger.
Okay.
And Paul Kruger said, this is the first black man whose hand I have shaken. But I say he's not telling the full truth.
Yeah.
Because Bishop Turner was a mulatto. A mulatto is a colored, what they used to call Cape colored.
Okay.
So he was shaking his hand because he was colored, He was not, But also other parts of history tells us about Paul Kruger, who was relaxed among black people.
Okay.
But he recognized the amateurs when it came into this country in 1897.
Okay.
Yes. And in 1908, Wilberforce Institute was established by Tansey with his sons.
Okay. Tansey.
Yeah, the Reverend J.Z. Tansey.
Okay.
And Wilberforce shook the whole of South Africa. Most people wanted their children to come and study at Wilberforce.
Wilberforce.
Yes. To come and they used to have a motto, training the hand, the head, and the heart. You understand what I mean? They were very industrious. And Everton Institute had other faculties, industrial, domestic science, a number of things there.
Wow. So Everton was like, it sounds like back then, like it was a very coming up place, like it was developing, like there were people coming here to start organizations that would empower people.
Yes, they started a lot of businesses,
a
lot of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And also that it is very significant that most of the people got their education at Wilberforce. The most highly educated people in Everton and in the Sowetos, in Gauteng, and across the Limpopos, Cape Town. I studied at the Institute.
Yeah.
I studied at the seminary within Wilberforce, RRI.
Wilberforce.
Yes, where I studied with fellows, the so-called colors. They still called the so-called colors until they decided to call them otherwise. Themselves otherwise. Some of them are calling themselves Khoisan already. But I studied with them at Wilberforce.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So Wilberforce, Everton is very big. Then missionary schools were only run by mainstream white missionary churches, like your Anglicans, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, and so on. Even Angie Kerk of the Boere. So for black people to have their own and struggle, raise funds, it took time to register Everton. Everton was only, Wilberforce.
Yes.
It only got registered around 1949. After the white people had to come for themselves, a person like Ainsland, who was an inspector of education, came there and looked and saw for himself. And he was overwhelmed by what he saw.
What was happening there?
At Wilberforce. And also, it was very interesting for black people in this country to see white people cringing to white people, to black people who were coming from across the seas.
Wow.
You understand what I mean?
Oh, that's interesting.
So all those dynamics worked for liberation.
Yeah, they pushed
the people. You understand what I mean?
So what was the course content there? Like what is it that were people receiving that made them to think differently?
At Everton.
Yes, at Everton at Wilberforce Center.
They were just taught education. There was nothing underhand like the underground theology.
Yeah.
They were taught theology. They were taught tailoring, building, trained as teachers.
Okay.
They ultimately had a matric section.
Wow.
The first junior certificate, graduate.
Yeah.
There was Mr. Charles Dimas, whose house still stands at Everton, of colored descent.
Yes.
But he had also come here with his brother David, who became the principal.
So they wanted to empower people pretty much against the injustices that were happening.
Yeah, and also break the laws of separate development and say colors one side, black.
Yes.
So colors, if you go to Everton, most of the the so-called colored people of Everton are still in Everton.
They're still living here.
They never moved out.
Oh, wow.
Because it is their stance. When you created the places like, what they call that place outside Sharpeville, I think, they didn't rush there.
They stayed.
They stayed because it is their land, it is their estate, and the people respected them.
Wow.
Some of them still have lighter complexion, sleek hair, but they speak Sotho, some of them better than I do.
So pretty much Wilberforce...
So it defeated apartheid. Yes.
It went against the status quo back then.
Yes.
And obviously, I want to understand, so Wilberforce, obviously it's named after William Wilberforce, right?
Yes, it is after William Wilberforce, who is said was an emancipator of slaves.
Yes.
It is named after also the university in Ohio, in America, in the state of Ohio, called Wilberforce University. Ran then by the so-called Negro people, the first of its kind to be run by black people, Wilberforce. And incidentally, it was established in a place that served as a what do they call that now? Almost casino brothel-like.
Okay.
And it was called Tawawa.
Okay.
That place. So the black people bought
that place. Okay.
Turned it into a college for themselves. Maybe the whites then in power said, the only place we can sell you it is this one.
Thinking that they'll continue in that line, but they had a different...
No, they established a very strong institute.
Wow.
So when Bishop Wright, who was one of the first PhDs in America, black PhD, came to be the bishop in South Africa.
Yes.
He established Wright and also worked very hard to upgrade Wilberforce. And he raised funds locally from people.
And this was also during the 1950s, right?
No, before the 1950s.
Okay.
That is from 1908. From 1932, 1936, he organized things like Tawawa, where people came and put money and put like
fundraising
for
a
the purpose of the students, helping the students, bringing utensils, bathtubs,
making sure that everything
works and it works is viable. And then the children can enjoy their stay at Wilberforce. We have come a mighty long way.
Wow.
Before 1955.
Yeah.
I'm going there because you pushed me there. I was not going to go there. I was just stuck with the 1950s.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see how...
in my book where you'll pick up all what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But when you have the privilege of getting
it exclusive here on the podcast, which is great because of... By then, when you read the book, you can be able to make the links between this conversation and also what is in the book and how it connects together with obviously the 1930s and also the 1950s
now that you've
as well.
taken the chunk of what I was going to hide from you, I can reveal now that Wilberforce trained African leaders like Kamuzu Banda. I don't know whether you
Kamuzu Banda.
Hastings Kamuzu Banda, the first president of Malawi.
Okay.
And Kwet Masire, the second president of Botswana after Cyril Zahama. Kwet Masire was trained there.
Wow.
Yes. Big business people like Sam Mutsuenyan, who became an ambassador, South African ambassador to some countries outside.
Yes.
Was big businessman who started the African Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
Was trained at Everton.
Wow.
Big other names that are in my book.
Yes.
People who were trained at Everton. Just to name a few. It produced boxers, great athletes like Elijah Lenks Makoni, a great boxer.
Yes.
Who was also trained as a teacher at Wilberforce. Went to teach there. And was also a sportsman.
Wow. So this place or this Everton, pretty much because it was in Everton, it helped out a lot of people who shaped how history unfolded, because they got their education from this area. And
yes.
Obviously what they were being taught there, it was how they can be able to liberate themselves.
Oh yes.
Like from the status quo that was like popular during that time, and which led them to starting organizations that would later change
the first
the world.
Newspaper in the Transvaal, so to say.
Yes.
The first black paper in the Transvaal was printed at Wilberforce.
Wow.
By a Mr. Kuzwayo.
Okay.
And then Reverend Tansi, Nimro Tansi, and Mr. Sibuze.
Yes.
This Sibuze's what did I say now? Zibuse Kuzwayo.
Okay.
They started the first newspaper in called the Christian Recorder.
Okay.
They printed it and published it at Everton.
Wow.
Under the auspices of the AME Church.
Wow.
I was not going to go into the AME Church influence that much now. I thought we would stick to the 50s, but during that time, it was producing best black people out of the country.
Wow. And it was still called Transvaal, right?
It was still called Transvaal. That's why the anthem of Wilberforce, the alma mater, speaks to the Transvaal. It says, in the province of Transvaal, glory as to thee, our alma mater, dear old Wilberforce.
Wow.
I could sing it better if I had a very wide voice.
No, that's cool, because I think like we've covered a lot of Everton history, and which is something that a lot of people are not aware of. So I think right now, like
let me also close off
by
saying McCamel himself was influenced very much by Wilberforce, by the bishops who came from America, and by people like Dr. Cohen, who was very, very highly educated and ran and became president of Wilberforce.
So and like this is interesting because of like just like getting an overview perspective of this, like we said, that this is not popular, and I think it shines a light to say, okay, like black people had like their moments in history where they were very instrumental, and we need to go back to that time and have like a glimpse of looking at what happened and how these events
influenced. They had moments of history where they were Herculean.
Yes, like they had the courage, and this is something that we not see today.
They were larger than life.
Yeah, like they were actually like showing like the world that black people can be able to stand up for themselves and for what they believe in, and be able to do it as well. So I think it's very interesting to look at it from that perspective. So, okay, like black people do have, or they have been. It's not a new thing.
Like the Wilberforce was not supported by the government.
Yeah, it was unpopular.
People paid, from whatever they got from salaries which were paid by churches. They would also share with students, buy them meals and so on, and so people were doing things for themselves. This will help young black people to know that you don't always have to expect things from government.
Yes. So meaning through uniting and building up like ourselves in that way, like we can be able to like create things that actually generate value like for black people, and also not depending so much on the government of the day, but showing that we are the government by coming together. Like you said, the Wilberforce, like it was not a government institution, but it had the influence in that level that it changed lives, just like obviously what people would expect from the government, but they showed that you don't necessarily need the government of the day to be there in order for you to change the situation.
In another book that I will be writing, second edition of, I'm going to be putting it that the idea of government itself is gone. You know what I mean? Indigenous people didn't have this kind of government, Westminster system and so red tapes, controls, but they had something bigger than that, and that worked for them. And people must aspire for
to reach
indigenous people
those levels.
To reach those levels.
No, I think that is very interesting, and I think our listeners also would be interested in actually, getting into this conversation, because I think like this is the first episode, and we would love to engage with our audience and hear from you guys that what do you think about this Black history that is not being shared like in the mainstream. And since we're in the month where the Sharpeville massacre took place, I think it's very appropriate for us to really look into this and really get a perspective of what really happened and what does this mean. How can we interpret this today and understand it better, and not because we know that following the status quo somehow it does not really give you all the answers. You somehow need to go out and seek those answers, because if you wait for someone to give you the information, you'll wait forever. So rather us taking this time right now to say, okay, like how can we find accurate information, and also how can we use this information to better tomorrow. So I think like in our next episode we will definitely,
by the way, to better today,
yes,
and tomorrow
of course, because I think it starts here. Like it starts with us making our research, and also like looking at how we can be able to utilize it to better today and tomorrow. So I think we've actually shared a lot today. And in closing, we've heard about the Black African liberation history that actually took place around the world, not just in South Africa. And it's interesting because it actually shows that Black people around the world are united, and we all want the same thing, and which is to be ourselves and to be independent, not live or be subservient to other races. And we want to be treated equally and as individuals. Like you don't have to have a perception about Black people and automatically think that we are all the same. Though we are Black African people, but we still need to keep our individuality and showcase what we are capable of. And I think obviously through our conversation, that's what I have caught on, especially around South Africa and Everton itself. To say, okay, because of now I'm in this place, Everton, and now because of this conversation, I no longer see it as a place that does not have history, because that's how I used to see it before. But now I see, okay, there's actually a huge history that was not uncovered, or that is not being uncovered yet in the mainstream, simply because of other entities think that if we have access to that information, we will we are a threat to them if we have that information, which I think makes no sense, because we live in a world where you can be able, there is nothing that actually limits you besides you limiting yourself. So meaning it shows a weakness from their side, because they are threatened by another person or another human being who has equal mind power or mind strength and also opportunities. But because of that, they might think that, because I think it's a bias pretty much that people have against other people, and they want them to become their subservient, whereas we are all equal. There is no one who's better than the other. So yeah, that's how I'm looking at it. So from you, is there how would you close it all in conclusion?
Yeah, I would help you to think also in this fashion.
Yeah.
That oppressors are not always white.
Yes, oppressors
are not always white.
Yes.
It is not a black and white thing.
Yes.
Say, for instance, if I have to shoot from the shoulder, the ANC government also want to put people in pockets. Part of the history part of this, the reason why the Everton history is not told,
yes,
is because ANC was not part of the beginnings of Everton in the 50s and Sharpeville in the 60s.
Which was PAC, right?
Yes, this whole area was PAC. And so there is always the undercurrent jealousy that is always there. They would never... I learned when I was away from Everton, somebody, some kind of MEC from Gauteng came to tell Everton that Everton never had any history.
What?
Because I was not there, I cannot mention her name now. But what I mean is that, and some people were very angry who were activists as young people. They walked out of, he said, Everton has never had political history. And I can say to her face now, we don't need political history, we need self-empowerment history. We need self-governance